Let's get some perspective on this developing story. John Manley, a senior advisor of Bennett Jones, Canada's former finance minister and former deputy prime minister, joins us now. Hunkering down in Newborough, Ontario. John, great to have you back with us. You know the procedures. You know how this stuff works theoretically. Just give us a sense on how you have felt about the developments overnight.
Well, I think this, first of all, is quite good news overall. It's a lot of money, for sure. May not be enough yet, but it's still a very important step. And further, despite the issues that arose over some elements of the legislation, I think Canadians were treated to what I think is a pretty positive display of how their democracy works. Opposition parties coming together to support the government on emergency measures that are necessary for the economy. We didn't hear any of the background noise that we've had south of the border about, whether this is a hoax or whether the cure is worse than the disease. None of that. I think we can be proud of how our system has worked.
Well, you're getting into something interesting because obviously with all the back and forth in Washington and even those comments from the president who seems to be eager to get the U.S. economy back up and running as soon as possible, I just wonder what that part means for Canada, since most health officials are not putting any, certainly they're not putting any dates like Easter of being able to get back to business.
No, I think that's right. This is a problem, of course, for business because everybody likes to plan, and nobody would like better than to say, well, okay, on April 15th, on April 30th, on May 15th, then you would at least be able to quantify your problem and plan to respond to it. We can't do that. But I think this is a time when it's good to rely on the scientific and medical experts that we have. We need to trust in them and their judgment. And I think what they're telling us is that if we relax our restrictions too soon, we risk really defeating the purpose of having done this in the first place. And so I think we're much better off to expect that we're going to be hunkered down for a while. And I think the role of government now is to ensure that people feel that they are both financially secure as well as secure that their health system can take care of them if it needs to be.
Well, I would like to get a little deeper into the specifics of that, because obviously we've heard a lot from the Prime Minister on ensuring that Canadians have what they need in the short term. But even here at BNN Bloomberg today, we've talked about more layoffs. Leon's, the furniture retailer, Transcontinental. It's getting a little confusing, just the process, the mechanics of getting money to you so that you can avoid the toughest decisions in a timely fashion. John, what would you say about that? Like how we have to not just get money into the hands of Canadians, but the communication around that in this very difficult time?
Well, I think, first of all, you can expect that there are going to be layoffs in those areas that are non-essential. If businesses have to close down, they're not going to keep their employees on. They can't. They may keep a certain number that are necessary to ensure that they can reopen. But a Leon's, for example, many of their employees are retail employees in a store that's now closed. So you would expect that they would lay people off. And I think it might have been a little more efficient if government had been more generous on the wage subsidy side. Instead of sending all of these people to the employment insurance system, needless to say, a 10% wage subsidy for what are really micro businesses really doesn't move the needle at all. So we saw the headlines today about 1 million employment insurance claims. You can expect that. Yeah. Because if you're running a business now, your big preoccupation is cash. And so I think the banks are working, day and night to deal with requests to draw down on credit facilities or to increase credit facilities on the part of businesses that are rightly realizing that there's not going to be much cash coming in the door by way of sales or other revenues. So they've got to get cash from somewhere, and they've got to preserve the cash they've got. So, we're going to have to see how this works through the economy. It's fine for banks to alleviate the pressure on commercial landlords by giving them deferral of mortgage payments. But if that's not passed on to commercial tenants, then what do you expect these retailers to do in malls or in other shopping areas? They're going to have to close. So there's a lot of moving parts here, and it's going to be interaction in the business community as well as government policies that make a difference.
We've only got time for one more, John, but given everything you're saying, we're talking about an $82 billion aid package in this country. The headlines all coming out of Washington are around $2 trillion worth of stimulus. The Prime Minister has repeatedly said nothing's off the table. Do you think we'll be in a position very soon where we won't be talking about $82 billion, we'll be talking about some number that is well beyond that?
I do, and I think what's going to happen is that not just income tax payments to the government need to be deferred, but all payments to government need to be deferred. So HST remittances, source deduction remittances, all of these, we're basically telling businesses that have no revenue to go borrow money to pay the government. That's a very inefficient way to get stimulus out. And I think that's the next shoe that will fall, and it'll increase the 82 to something over 100.
Yeah, we are almost out of time, but just because you were talking about Leon's earlier, their release made no mention of non-essential shutdowns, which I guess raises the question, because we even talked about Nike this morning, like the stages of their business. One of the stages is that point when people feel comfortable enough to come back into the stores. And I guess that's what you're talking about a little bit here. Well,
exactly. This is not going to be turn it on, turn it off. It was a bit of a rheostat to ramp this up. It's going to be a bit of a gradual decline. People, you see it on the sidewalks. People are giving one another a wide berth. Yeah. That apprehension that somebody might infect us is something that's going to be in all of our psyches, I think, for a while to come.
Okay, John, thanks very much. Always good to get your perspective.